Thank you very much. I'll just start by saying I'm a Catholic, but I won't be using any religious arguments at all, because I think it is important that on occasions we ground our arguments purely in reason. But as a Catholic, I really do feel at home because everybody is sitting at the back, and that's something we're used to. So let me begin by thanking you all for your work in the pro-life cause, and in particular thanking Isabel for everything you do, for your advocacy, for your work at the grassroots in promoting the humanity of the unborn and his or her protection under the law, but also for that work which really does go unseen, caring for parents who are struggling to bring and welcome new life into the world. Confucius was reported to have said, "When words lose their meaning, people lose their liberty." Well, we could rephrase that in the context of this debate. We could say today that when words lose their meaning, the most vulnerable will lose their lives. So let us be clear. The humanity of the unborn and the fact that an unborn baby is a him or a her is a scientific and rational reality. It's not just a matter of faith or religious belief. From the moment of conception, the unborn baby is developing a heart, a brain, a nervous system, and as our little badges show, little baby feet. But in no other area of the law do we permit the killing of an individual simply because they are still developing. Some babies will become disabled children, and we can detect that in the womb. But in no other area of the law do we kill somebody just because they are disabled. And the unborn baby is, of course, entirely dependent upon their mother. But in no other area of the law do we permit the killing of an individual just because they are entirely dependent on another person. Now, who could kill another person? In reality, very few people could. And yet, nearly 1/3 of babies who are conceived are medically aborted. And there can only be one reason, really, why we allow this. We've convinced ourselves that they're not actually babies. They're not actually human persons. And the way we have done that is through the abuse of language. Those who campaign for legalized abortion use euphemisms. In other words, they distort language in order to avoid a reality that is too painful to confront. Now, at the time the 1967 Abortion Act was passed, an unborn baby would have been regarded as exactly that, a baby living but not yet born. Indeed, however misguided and however awful the consequences of that act, on some fundamental level, at that time, it was understood that abortion meant the ending of a life. It's even more interesting to look at the legal framework that surrounded the 1967 Abortion Act. That originated 160 years ago. 3 acts of Parliament sat alongside the Abortion Act, and they were called the Infant Life Preservation Act, the Child Destruction Act, and the Offences Against the Person Act. Isn't it extraordinary that nearly 200 years ago, without the advances of scientific understanding that we now have, scanning and all the rest of it, we call the unborn baby exactly what it is: a person, a child, an infant life. How have we unlearned what is rationally and scientifically true? Now, there's no doubt that the culture has changed since then, and it's changed in part at least because the language has changed. Now, this might sound like an academic point, but I think it's important. Very few people think explicitly about the detailed moral implications of every political and moral view that they hold. We work on the basis of rules of thumb. We have to. We absorb things from our culture. So if people who support legal abortion are able to change the language that they use, then they've won half the battle. If they can ensure that people intuitively think that an infant life is a bunch of cells or part of a woman's body, then those who want to protect life in the womb end up trying to push water uphill. The language used by pro-abortion campaigners dehumanizes the person in the womb in order to turn abortion into either a neutral or a positive act. Nobody would want to kill a human person, so the objective of pro-abortion campaigners is to ensure that we don't think of the child as a human person. And those efforts have been shockingly successful. Unborn babies, for example, are described as part of a woman's body, rather than children with their own body. And abortion is described as a reproductive choice. Now, you would expect pro-abortion campaigners to try to change the terms of the debate by changing the meaning of words. That's how political debate often works. But the problem goes much deeper. It's been absorbed into our institutions. So the World Health Organization, for example, strongly promotes pro-abortion policies in the name of healthcare. This, for example, is the World Health Organization's main front-page statement on abortion. Induced abortion is a simple and common healthcare procedure, ensuring that women and girls have access to abortion care is fundamental to meeting the UN Sustainable Development Goals relating to good health and well-being. Well, for the avoidance of doubt, the ability to legally, medically abort an unborn baby is not fundamental to meeting any Sustainable Development Goal, and nor is it healthcare. Our own government links abortion to the provision of foreign aid, describing abortion as a health and reproductive right. As Pope Francis said, this is nothing other than ideological colonization, because the peoples of most of the countries that receive foreign aid know, just as we used to know, that abortion involves the taking of the life of a human being. As we've heard, when buffer zones were placed around abortion clinics, politician after politician, including many who were lawyers, said that buffer zones were being imposed to prevent harassment and intimidation around abortion clinics. Again, this is an abuse of language. Not only was there no harassment and intimidation taking place, as was found by a Home Office inquiry, harassment and intimidation were already illegal under pre-existing Acts of Parliament. Supporters of the banning of prayer and the offering of help to pregnant mothers use words such as harassment and intimidation in order to make extreme views seem reasonable. Indeed, this has now become the official language of government. The responsible minister, Jess Phillips, on the relevant government website, writes how buffer zones are necessary to prevent harassment, intimidation, and to ensure access to healthcare. Abortion appears under the guise of healthcare, and prayer is described as harassment. Now, when it comes to the question of abortion and the status of an unborn baby, we do have the advantage of our perspective being a clear matter of scientific fact. Talking about mammals in general, National Geographic, hardly a hotbed of social conservatism, states sexual reproduction occurs when the sperm from the male parent fertilizes an egg from the female parent, producing an offspring genetically different from both parents. In other words, abortion happens after reproduction. It is not a reproductive choice. The great pro-life campaigner Ruth Packoluck, who was an atheist who became a Catholic as a result partly of her pro-life work, said, explaining her work in the pro-life area, "I know that abortion kills a member of the human race. This is not a religious belief. It is a simple biological fact." Indeed, it is a simple biological fact with profound implications. So finally, where do we go from here? Well, there are trends running in our direction. Surely advances in scanning and so on must ultimately have some impact on culture. There are even some favorable legal developments. Parents can now receive a baby loss certificate if they lose their baby before miscarriage, through miscarriage before 24 weeks. The same people, literally the same people, who call for wider access to abortion, calling it healthcare, often call for more rights for mothers who experience miscarriage when they call it a baby. How long can this cognitive dissonance last? So we must make the case that as soon as conception takes place, there is a life that needs nurturing. And our language and our practice, I think, must focus on promoting the humanity of the unborn child, which in turn our laws must protect. And let me end with 3 brief suggestions. I make these realizing that you're not all Christians or even believers necessarily, but I think these are suggestions that you could translate into other walks of life. Firstly, in your parish intercessions, pray for the unborn and for the parents of unborn children. They need our prayers. Secondly, include in your prayer parents who have experienced miscarriage. Thirdly, in parish bereavement groups, and many parishes do have bereavement groups, invite parents who have had a miscarriage to those groups, and perhaps when they're ready, even invite them to give a talk. If we are truly to change culture so that once again we think of an unborn baby as a human person, we must begin with our own practice. We can do that in simple ways, and that can then radiate out in order to change the culture in the country more widely. Thank you.